Okay, so, noting the time and the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-BOXBOROUGH Regional School Committee to order. So I move that we move into executive session, be convened under that an executive session be convened under M.G.L. Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. I also move that an executive session be convened under, I'm sorry, we need to vote after the first one.
Roll call vote on each of those motions.
I'm sorry, I apologize. So, yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, I'd also move that an executive session be convened under M.G.L. Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to conduct strategy with respect to litigation. An open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the board. Yes. Oh, did I have to wait for a second? Okay. Can you mark that down, please? I thank God Beth isn't here, because she'd just be like, Amy, come on. Okay.
We got it.
Got it? Okay. So Mary seconded both of those.
Brigid's actually taking the votes.
Okay. Thank you, Brigid. We expect to reconvene the regular meeting around 7:15. Meeting now. So I'd like to start by just saying thank you to all of you that came this evening. And I would like to start by introducing and welcoming our new interim superintendent, Mr. Bill McAlduff. I had the pleasure of sitting with Bill on Monday, and I'm very impressed and excited about his positive energy, focus, and dedication to the students in our district. And also his clear willingness and intention to work collaboratively with our amazing leadership team. Bill, I really do look forward to a great year working with you. All right, I'm going to now ask for a discussion around the contract.
Okay, so Paul and I were the negotiating committee with Bill. For those in the audience who are interested, there are copies of the contract on the table over there. I also want to thank Paul and Brigid also, because Brigid helped with something called a critical shortage waiver, which we're working on. And I want to thank Marie, who was a lot of help in this process. So we met with Bill, we negotiated the contract. Some things I'd like to point out, on page 3 at the bottom, the salary. So we've agreed to pay Bill $185,000 prorated for the period of August 28th through June 30th. So that comes to $156,547. He can start full-time on August 28th, this coming Monday, but he did come in 3 days this week, and so we'll be paying him a per diem rate of $712 for the 3 days. So that's an additional $2,136. In terms of other benefits, he's entitled to all the employee insurance plans available to the professional administrative personnel. He's entitled to 17 paid vacation days, which is prorated for the level for senior administrators. He will receive 30 sick days, paid sick days if needed, and there are restrictions around how that sick time is used. He's also entitled to 4 paid personal days. He will also receive a monthly stipend of $500 from September through June. These are for all personal out-of-pocket expenses that he incurs related to employment, including transportation costs. And this is something we negotiated with Bill directly. He has experience getting this in other districts, and it just makes that administrative burden of dealing with all the receipts and all of the expense reports, it takes away that burden. Otherwise, I think this is a fairly standard contract. It's very parallel to other contracts we've had, except for it makes corrections for it. It recognizes it's an interim period. And so we've discussed this in executive session. I guess if anyone has any questions or comments, we should raise them now.
If there are no questions or comments, then I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the contract between Mr. McAlduff and the district.
Second.
I'll let you decide who seconded.
Okay, I have the power.
Yeah, that's the power.
Whose voice did I hear?
Yeah.
I think I heard Katie's. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes unanimously.
And I'll just add, Bill was terrific to work with on this, so thank you.
I'm going to let you have your say.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to the committee for this opportunity. I've been able to spend 3 really excellent days this past week in the district, and I would like to thank all who I've met who have warmly welcomed me with their enthusiasm and dedication and commitment. I've been very impressed by everyone that I've interacted with this past week. The central office staff have just been terrific in assisting me getting settled. And in particular, though, I really would like to thank Marie, who not only has been a valued resource for me, but I really want to thank her for her leadership this summer. Her leadership in ensuring that everything that happens in the summer months in preparation for a new school year, which, believe it or not, even though all the staff's gone, is a lot. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. And of course, Marie, working with the staff that are here, really has done a remarkable job. Our schools will be ready. They look good. And I just want to thank her for her extraordinary efforts. So thank you very much, Marie. And then finally, I just want to reiterate how very excited I am to be here. And I very much look forward to working with the committee, to working with the administrative team, with staff, with students, with parents, and with members of both communities in moving forward and making sure that the 2017-2018 school year is a very, very positive one and a very productive one. And I know that that will happen, and I'm excited to start. And full speed ahead Monday. So thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 6, and I am going to turn it over to Brigid for this.
So there's a memo in the packet about this. This item has to do with the resolution of the question about the release of unredacted confidential executive session minutes. As you know, the investigation into the release of these unredacted confidential executive session minutes has been concluded. As some of you know, the redacted minutes were sent in PDF format to several members of the public to fulfill a public records request. Unfortunately, in the course of electronic operations performed on the unredacted PDF documents by one or more of those who requested them, the redactions disappeared and the individual or individuals were able to view the minutes in their entirety, which they proceeded to do. We have reviewed our procedures for redacting documents to be sure this will not happen again. While the district certainly did not intend for the unredacted minutes to be released to the public, the Acton Forum's decision to publish the minutes on his blog was intentional. We deeply regret any part the district might have played, however inadvertently, by releasing redacted minutes that could become unredacted in this manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigid. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 7. Since our last meeting, we received the resignation from Christina Rieschlick. The policy for the fulfillment of an unexpired term is in front of you. It's in a white packet that looks like this, and there are also copies for the public over on the table. Before I go over the next steps that we need to take, I am going to take a moment and turn it over to the committee to see if any of you have a comment or something you'd like to say.
I miss Christina already. She did a lot of work for the district, and I just think that we will be hard pressed to find someone of her caliber. What I struggle with is understanding the circumstances under which she resigned, and I think I'd like to have some investigation, or at least made public, what led to her resignation. I think that Christina and I saw eye to eye. Christina and I saw eye to eye on a lot of issues. She explained to me a lot of the actions that she took in recent years, and I remember thinking that a reasonable person could very easily have done the same thing, and I believe that it could very easily have been me, and I want to understand what it is that caused her to resign, because what happened to her could easily happen to me. So I'll put that out there. I would like to make public the circumstances under which she resigned.
I just wanted to thank Christina publicly for all of the years of service that she gave to this district, to the students in the district, to this committee. I remember when she first was elected to the committee, I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but we were in the midst of the regionalization process, and I'll never forget Christina's enthusiasm as part of this committee. It was around the time that we were all going out to our respective transfer stations to hand out flyers, and in comes this woman who I hadn't met before, Christina, and she's got coolers for all of us to take to the transfer stations. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's no way I would ever have done that. I can't believe how thoughtful and dedicated she is. And that really never stopped. In one way or the other, Christina was always putting herself out there, I think, as an example to all of us about what it really means to work hard and to try to do the right thing for the right reasons. And I'm going to greatly miss her point of view. She brought a lot of thoughtfulness. I've seldom seen anyone as prepared as she was every time she walked into this room. She had a full understanding of the issues on the table, what things would be a result of the votes that we were taking. She was so well prepared. She worked so hard, and I don't think people in the community recognize the kind of sacrifice it takes to work as hard as she did for the district. I can remember being at a number of meetings at 7 a.m. in the conference room down the hall with Christina, and she brought her son with her before school. I mean, this is dedication. So I just want to thank her for that. She really contributed so much to our district, to both of our towns, and she will be greatly missed. And it's really unfortunate that she resigned. I feel really bad about that, and I'm going to miss her greatly. So thank you, Christina. I hope you're not watching this meeting, but if you are, thank you very much.
I'd like to echo those sentiments. Christina was so hardworking. I'm really actually physically anxious that the next person who comes in isn't going to take on as much work as she did, and then it's more work for all of us. She did an enormous amount of work. She's a great person. It makes me terribly sad to live in a community that made her feel the way she did, that she had to resign. My heart is so sad about that. But I respect her and I understand the need to do this, but she's going to be sorely missed.
I want to reiterate it. I got to work with Christina on the PTO. I do, you know, we all say how much we're going to miss Christina, and I don't know if the people in the community understand the amount of work that she did. And just like any one of us, any decision we make, everybody's trying to do the best that they can for the district. But the amount of hours, I mean, I hope anybody who puts their name in understands that a huge set of, I know is it a set of shoes, to fill, because she was unrelenting with the number of hours that she put in. She was on a numerous number of committees, and like you said, 7 o'clock a.m., her young son in elementary school is coming to meetings and then walking on his own to school during those meetings. You know, we hear parents say they can't make it to our meetings in the evening because they have too much going on. And she had young children and was doing this. So I think as much as we're going to miss her, I think the district has no clue as to what they just lost and what, unfortunately, I think they pushed out, because it's going to show on what happens during the school year, because the amount of work that she did and getting stuff moving and organized, I'm sorry, I can't do it. So she is going to be missed by the administration, by the students and everybody, and it's a shame.
No one has done more damage to the district than the ones who were responsible for her stepping down.
I'm gonna move on. Thank you. I will personally miss Christina a lot. I'm not gonna say anything else about it. Okay, so according to our policy is BBBE, and it's on the second page over here. We are sending a letter to the Board of Selectmen, the chairperson, Janet Adachi, tomorrow morning. There will be a press release following that. The press release will say the members of the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee and the Acton Board of Selectmen will meet on September the 7th at 7 p.m. to fill the school committee vacancy resulting from Christina Richlick's resignation. If you would like to be considered for this position, please submit a statement of interest along with a brief description of your qualifications to Beth Petter, School Committee Executive Assistant, and then her email is here. It's bpetter@abschools.org, or ABRSD Central Office by 5 p.m. on September the 5th, 2017. The term of this appointment will be through the annual Acton election on March 27, 2018. Also, any questions that you have can be directed to me as the chair, Amy Krishnamurthy, which is akrishnamurthy@abschools.org, or Beth's phone number, which is 978-264-3306. And all of this will be posted on the website. I certainly don't expect anyone to have copied that down. And I will say that I am more than happy to meet with anyone who's interested and would just like more information. And if you don't want to meet with me, there are 10 other committee members. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to sit down and just kind of talk about the commitment and the expectation. Or, okay, 9. No, we are all absolutely willing to have a conversation. So feel free to reach out to us. So this is the, oh, nope, I'm going to do the warrant. Hold on one second. All right, we have some warrants. Warrant number 18-003, dated 8/10/17, in the amount of $1,405,054.98. Warrant 18-004 PR, dated 8/17/17, in the amount of $170,881.17. Warrant number 18-004, dated August 24th, 2017, in the amount of $1,037,717.93. We have the student activities warrant 18-004 SH, dated August 24th, 2017, in the amount of $6,858, and 18-004 BL, August 24th, dated $29,728.35. And then the payroll gross, which is P-1804 and P-1804V, dated August 17th, 2017, in the amount of $590,915.89, for a total of $3,241,156.32. And I'll pass those around for signatures.
I forgot to ask one question in regards to the vacancy. I just asked Paul, is it one vote per person? Is there, because we don't do a weighted vote during
So
that,
the
right?
way it works is that on our September 7th meeting, the Board of Selectmen will come to that meeting, and the Boxborough members will step out, and it's the Acton members of the school committee and the Board of Selectmen members of the members, and it's one vote per person. So we also have minutes. I'm going to double check. Marie, we have the minutes to be approved, right? For some reason I don't have that listed, but I thought we had minutes.
Yes, we do. It's the minutes of July 26th meeting.
That's what I thought. Okay, so we have the minutes from July 26th. Does anyone have any comments about that or corrections?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, I'm going to move, this is the point in our meeting where we allow for public participation on items that are not on our agenda. So is there anyone from the public that would like to speak at this time? Yes. Please, I'm going to ask that you please come to the microphone. Our policy is 2 minutes to speak, and there's a copy of it on the table over there.
Hi, Joe Will, Quabog Road, Acton. This is about the district's tutor database. I would like to suggest the school committee consider opening the database to the district's substitute teachers. Need any more information? The tutor, T-U-T-O-R, tutor. It used to be that the tutor database was open to anybody, everybody, and it was bad. Since then, it's been closed to the school staff, both certified and non-certified, and high school students. There are 2 of those on it now, and 1 other person. And opening it to substitute teachers could be a good perk, for instance, to substitute teachers, and they certainly are all Corey cleared.
Thank you very much. Would you like to respond, Marie?
Sir, we'll look into that for you. If you give me your name, we'll get back to you. I know there were some questions about the ethics rules and whether you can have more than 1 role, but we'll look into that.
Okay. Marie, it is your turn now for the staffing updates.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is really my most fun thing I get to present to you all in the course of the year, and the most enjoyable part of our work. is bringing on new educators for the students in the district. We start early, we work hard at it, we post our known openings, anticipated openings in late February, and we do job fairs and we recruit, and we work right up until we still have 1 or 2 openings right now. I'm pleased to share with you in your packet the list of all of our new staff as well as a brief description of their background. And we have highly qualified and quite a few really experienced, accomplished educators coming to the district this year. Interestingly, when we started the year, we thought we would have a small hiring season. We only had 6 retirees. And when we do the budget, the deadline to notify us of a retirement is December 15th. So we budget, we take out the salary of the person retiring, and then we budget a 3M or a third-year teacher with a master's degree. So we're able to sort of manage our budget that way. This year, a lot of our openings came late in the cycle, and this has been a little bit of a trend in that, similar to our students, our staff are more mobile than they might have been 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so on. And so we're keeping track, and I put some numbers in the memo for you, in that really the people who are leaving us are mostly due to family decisions, a spouse relocating to another part of the country, that kind of thing. So it's hard to lose teachers that way. We actually had 4 openings in science. That's a hard area to recruit. We did hire veteran teachers in that area. We were very lucky. Hard to find in many cases. So the level at which we hired is higher than it's been in many years. We budget 3M. But the bottom line budget is still okay because the teachers who left were veteran teachers, and we had their salaries in the budget, and we didn't know they were going to leave until after the budget was done. So if that makes any sense. There are a couple of administrative changes I want to report on. So you all know that Joanne Campbell submitted her letter of resignation in July, and she left the high school and the district to take a position in a private company, an educational technology company. We want to wish her all the best in that. And we have appointed Associate Principal Larry Dory to be the interim principal at the high school. And then his position was open. And since then, we have posted and hired Maureen O'Grady, who is a dean at the high school, to step up to be the interim associate principal. And just last week, we hired one of our wonderful English teachers named Michael Chorba to be the interim dean. So these things have sort of this domino effect. And I think, yes, this afternoon, we hired a new English teacher. We have one more .4 opening for English, also due to somebody transferring within the high school, and we're hoping to fill that. I think that's our last opening. So all the material is there. You'll also see the list of educators who have left the district. In the end, we hired 32 certified staff, which is right in line with what we've hired the last 3 or 4 years. So thanks to all of our principals and department leaders who work so hard to hire the best people we can hire, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
I will say I did go to the luncheon yesterday. It was fabulous. It was really awesome meeting the new teachers. They're so enthusiastic and excited, and it was really nice. And thank you to the union who sponsored lunch for all of us.
Marie, can you, and I should have asked you this ahead of time so you'd be prepared, so if you don't know, that's okay. But approximately how much time does it take over the summer to hire all of these positions? Both, not only for your time, but I'm sure there are department heads and so on involved, and I'm just curious, because that's significant.
You can imagine a lot.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of our hiring in the April-May window. schools are funny places. We're very process-oriented. So to get a job as a teacher, you come in and you interview with a group of anywhere from 8 to 15 people. That's your first visit. Then you're invited back and you teach a lesson. If, we'll invite 3 or 4 back. And so then they meet with the department, they meet with grade level, they meet with some other people, and they teach a lesson. And then from there, they determine who to bring forward to the principal. That's like at the high school and the junior high. The elementary, the principal's involved all along. And so then it's another interview, and then they meet with the superintendent as the last stop. So either Glenn and I or I met every one of them. So in the summer, our English department leader, and they're not really scheduled to work in the summer. They know that they have to come in for some number of days in the summer. But she's put in 10, 15 hours a week for the last 3-4 weeks. And the principals, and these are the certified staff. We have 70 or 80 support staff that are also being hired. And then the HR and payroll staff, I can't even thank them enough and tell you how hard they work to get this all up and running. All the benefits people, it's about a 2-hour session for benefits. We do them in groups, but there are several groups when you get to the number of people we have, and then all the part-time people as well. So I don't have a total quantity, but quite a bit.
More follow-up. Can you give an idea about how many, and I'm sure it differs by subject matter, but what kind of pool you're looking at to fill these various positions?
So elementary, we get the most applicants. It's very hard to get a job as an elementary teacher because there are so many people out there. 300 to 400 applicants per position. And that's down from 700. We were getting 700 applicants 5 years ago. Areas such as special education, harder to find, very hard to find. We might get 12 to 20 applicants, and 6 to 8 of them might be really qualified. Is that fair? English language educators has been a really tough area for us to find, and it's an area we've grown a lot. So in that area alone, I would say Dawn and her staff spent countless hours this summer, and we've hired 3 or 4 since June. And then at the high school and junior high, I'd say 12 to 20 per opening. So administrators, we often get 30 to 40. So.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments for Marie? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Bertolino. Dave is our new finance director. This is your first meeting, isn't it?
First one.
Yeah. Yes, well, congratulations. Or welcome, or I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I don't know.
2 out of 3. Thank you. The first. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody who's looked at this slide up there and said, oh, all these other agenda items, I can't wait. This must be the main event. No, it's not the main event. It's just, I think, the only PowerPoint for the evening. So thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. I should say that up front, just acknowledge that Claire Janot and the finance team were instrumental in putting this package together, the materials that you have received. My experience so far, I've been just about completing my 2nd month. AcTON-BOXBOROUGH is as advertised. Very professional and technically superior staff that I've been working with. So this presentation is the culmination of a team effort. Claire and I discussed, and FY17 was Claire's year. So she knew how to tell the tale, and I get to make the formal presentation to you. The information that that's being presented, you have all of this in tonight in the packet for this meeting, a detailed memo that Claire prepared. it's a comprehensive analysis in that memo. It's a lengthy one, and she goes into detail about the revenue and cost centers for fiscal 17. I'm going to give highlights during this presentation. There are Munis revenue summaries, which show a very strong financial position and trend for Acton-Boxborough. There's a Munis expenditure summary by character code, with which you should be familiar. And there are special revenue and grant fund summaries. To be transparent, we just want to present all of the fund information at the district's disposal. The remaining of this presentation will be highlights. This was Claire's insistence that we put in the caveat that data are based on the preliminary closing. The final report will be done after the audit. I have the great news of saying that the audit was completed yesterday. I had an exit discussion with the lead, with the partner of the audit firm, and he told me he believes the reports will be issued with no findings. I say October here, and understand, since you know this, since you got this last week, I anticipated that the field work was going to be completed. It was supposed to have been completed today, so I took the chance that it was going to be completed. They finished yesterday, which is again a testimony to the hard work by the finance department. We think that the final audit report will be available in September, and Marie and I have discussed putting it on one of the upcoming agendas to have the formal presentation of the audit report. Highlights of the general fund. Revenues exceeded budget by almost $800,000, or almost 1%. Expenditures below budget by over $800,000, and exactly 1%. This is very good financial news. The district is clearly in sound financial position. The budgetary fund balance increased by $1.6 million. It's not necessarily what E&D will increase by, but it should be fairly close. I have to say, first time seeing this information in my role at AB, I applaud the ability of the district to apply sound and reasonably based conservative budget principles. It puts you in good stead. Revenue highlights. Again, see the memo that under Claire's name and the Munis reports for analysis of these. But highlights, again, nearly an $800,000 variance from budget to actual. Major components of that, one of them was state aid. The budget is always built before the state issues its budget, and so the district had a favorable swing for FY17 relating to the components of state aid. Other revenues, again, an example of conservative approach to budgeting revenue. Don't commit to spending money that isn't assured, and so there was a significant favorable variance there. Assessments, the amount of the assessments was on target. That's 80% of the district's revenues is a stable and predictable revenue source. That's the bond rating agencies like that. I'll make a comment about that in a minute. And there's a brief E&D analysis coming up in the presentation, but there was a $200,000 budgeted transfer, and that's what actually did come to pass. Expenditure highlights, again, you can look at the Munis character code report for line item analyses. $847,000 favorable variance. We spent that much less than budget. Major favorable variances, you can see them. Salaries, over $500,000 favorable. Large amount of health insurance under budget. Out-of-district tuitions, the gross expense was under budget. So irrespective of the funding source, we pay for tuitions via the appropriated budget and via circuit breaker, but the gross amount of tuitions was favorable to budget by $263,000. And some other fairly large, I said to Claire, I come from a much smaller district than this, and I looked at some of the variances, and I said, Claire, there's some pretty big differences there. And Claire said to me, Dave, it's an $85 million budget. Okay, there are still some pretty big variances. And fortunately for the district, the amount of variances and the dollars associated to them are a lot bigger in Category 2 than Category 3 here. The major unfavorable variances, I understand that the workers' comp expense is not a surprise to the committee. The capital outlay, we spent more on capital outlay in FY17, largely due to accelerating some fiscal 18 projects into fiscal 17. I'll make a comment about that in a minute as well. Building and grounds maintenance, about $200,000 over budget. That's consistent with the prior year, both in relation to the amount of money spent and the budget variance. And so it might be wise to consider looking at the level at which these costs are budgeted to maybe more accurately reflect actual costs in the budget document itself. E&D highlights. This is an exemplary trend. In just 3 years' time from a baseline of June 30, 2014, E&D has, in round numbers, gone up $1 million a year. The district is positioned very well to help provide for future educational needs of the district and cushion against unforeseen events. So these numbers obviously speak for themselves. The certified E&D will come after the balance sheet is submitted to the state. The deadline for that is October, as I'm sure you know. Two other things to note. One is the statutory E&D limit, which I mentioned in there, and the other is that Moody's during this past year removed its negative outlook to the credit rating. This is especially important in light of the proposed school construction project that we'll hear about later in the meeting. And I can tell you that Claire was very proud of this. She and I, both as former auditors, know the impact of the bond analyst's outlook about a district. So this is more good news. Other funds, just showed you the total amount expended in revolving and grant funds. This is just to show how significantly the appropriation is supplemented and the town's assessments are supplemented by funds available to the district. There are two noteworthy highlights relating to other funds. One, no negative balances. This would have otherwise impacted the E&D calculation, but there were no negative balances as of June 2017. And this is before my time, certainly at AcTON-BOXBOROUGH, but by looking at the trend in the bottom line of the athletic program, the loss trend has clearly been reversed in the last 2 years, and those numbers are significantly better. I put this slide up here just as a reminder. This was reprinted after a few edits from the FY18 budget presentation. It's here as an FYI and a reminder that these are the strategies that were implemented inherent in the FY18 budget. Increase E&D. We saw, I just reported to you how that worked in FY17. It may not be as significant in FY18, but we're looking at conservatively budgeting revenues and hopefully turning back funds into E&D at the end of the year. Retain some circuit breaker funds for unanticipated sped costs. The circuit breaker balance at the end of FY17 was higher than it was at the previous year, so this has been already put into effect, and there's some additional resources available in the circuit breaker fund. Those funds all get spent. What's in there at the end of FY17 all gets spent before the upcoming year is out. And address capital priorities. As I said to you, some FY18 items were moved up, were advanced, and have been spent. The capital budget is approved. I'll talk about that on the next slide. And so those are the guiding strategies right out of your FY18 budget presentation. And as a reminder, the FY18 budget itself is about a teacher over $86 million. I was hoping I'd get at least one chuckle for that line. Okay. Lastly, preliminary views about the FY18 budget, and this is from Claire and I looking at available information. The state adopted its budget in July. It resulted in additional money for the district relative to both Chapter 70 and choice and charter reimbursement versus what had been budgeted back in late 2016. The capital budget, the total budgeted amount is $770,000. About a little more than $250,000 was accelerated into FY17. The Leary Field project, beautiful by the way, the estimated savings look to be about $100,000 on that project. All of this represents potential budget savings or an opportunity to similarly accelerate other projects or uses. Lastly, there are some unanticipated expenses from the budget presentation. Superintendent contract, the former superintendent contract, and the Office of Civil Rights compliance matter for which the website needs upgrading. These will be quantified and reflected in budget reports that I submit to you during FY18. I'm sorry to end on the down note. Everything else had been positive to that point, but on balance, the district is in very good financial shape. And so I thank you for your attention, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, David. If we go back...
Too soon.
Well, if we can't go back, that's fine. I'll just point out that we had a favorable out-of-district expenses. Is that because we brought more kids back in, or is that just aging out?
So what you're talking about, if we can find it, is this one.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer to your question. From experience, it can be a combination. And so if the chairman allows, I'd love to have Dawn.
You want to phone a
weigh
friend?
in.
It's not because we brought students back. I would say that it was because the budget was a little bit on the higher side for sure from the last year. But yeah, it would not be because we brought students back.
So I hope this isn't nitpicky given the scope of our budget, but the Leary Field project was, we budgeted $450,000 and the low bid was $250,000. So I'm just wondering why the cost savings is just $100,000.
The only thing I'm able to put on a presentation publicly at this point, JD Head has been away. We've not gotten the final accounting for it. I'm comfortable saying that in round numbers, and that's the roundest number on my presentation, is $100,000. It is probably a little bit in excess of that.
I can answer.
But, yeah.
I'm sorry. So Diane, the Leary Field project, actually prior to the project, we had somebody come in and give us the scope and give us a real estimate, and the estimate was something like $509,000. We budgeted $450,000, and we knew that some of the youth groups were going to donate $50,000 towards it. The bids came in, they ranged $280,000 and up, but that was the base bid, not counting some of the ad alternates and so on. So we did more than the base bid. We're spending a total of about, I don't know if it's $350,000 or $400,000, but that $50,000 is in there as well. So there's a $100,000 surplus. So I know you originally heard sort of the bids being quite low, but and they were significantly lower than what we thought they were going to be. So it's all good news. And the band is out there at band camp all week. The football team is back. So take some time to go out and look. It really looks great, and it's going to be great for the kids. We were out there for the solar eclipse with the band and their whole, we had our glasses. It was pretty fun.
Deanne?
Not to be Debbie Downer, but was there talk of lights? So we didn't do the lights, we just did the field only?
The lights are on the capital list as a
Okay.
high priority, but
They were-
we haven't put them in the budget yet.
Paul, go ahead.
So David, going back to the transportation, favorable transportation, I think it was in the same slide. Yeah, okay, there we go. Oh, that's both regular and sped.
Yes.
We have, my understanding is that we have a, I forget what we call it, stabilization, or a, what do we call it? Rolling account for the sped transportation? Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yes, we created a revolving account for it, but we
Revolving.
haven't funded it.
Right, well, so, okay,
Right.
that was my question, is that, so some of this, I don't know what the split is, but I'm wondering if we could fund our revolving account with some of this surplus, is that?
I think you would have needed to do that before the books were closed. I mean, this is now going to flow into E&D. So if you have a revolving fund without a funding source identified, you're going to need to formally make a transfer into it.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I'm going to move on to the school building committee update. It's Marie and Mary.
I have to admit, I have not been this nervous at a school committee meeting in a long time, and it's because Beth isn't here. So we're all hoping.
We all feel that way.
We're all hoping we don't let her down. But we've got things in place, I think. So we're giving you an update from the building committee to the school committee on the school building project and where things stand. There's a lot of information here. There is a memo in your packet, and then the presentation. I made hard copies that are in front of you as well. And when Beth gets back, we'll post it on the website. All right, a little bit of background about the master planning process. We've been involved in this process for 2 years now. It started, so it's been a comprehensive master plan, and it started with phase 1 in September of 2015 with a full facilities review of all 8 schools and all of the facilities and everything that needs to be done over the next 15 to 20 years to keep them up to date. That phase 1 was completed in February 2016. There's an extensive link off of the AB Schools website with all the documents related to all of this, and there's an extensive phase 1 capital improvement plan posted there. Following that, we went into phase 2, which was the educational visioning. The educational visioning took place from February to December of It's February 2017 to December 2017. And that was the visioning process. We had 80 folks involved in that process. We had 3 full-day sessions with 80 people. They included teachers, administrators, parents, community members, students from the high school. And Doran Whittier is the consultant we used for both phase 1 and phase 2. And they led us through that process. Outside of those 3 visioning days, there were several meetings with elementary principals, junior high administrators, senior high administrators, and really visioning what education is going to look like in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years at AB and what that means in terms of our facilities. So that completed. There was a big forum in December, and there was all kinds of documents, again, posted on the website. So I just want to be clear about the dates. It was February 2016 to December 2016. I am sorry about that. All right. During that process, actually April of the previous year, we had submitted a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority for 3 buildings that we knew were in need of repair. And that information came out of the Phase 1, and we submitted it making Douglas the priority school, Gates and Conant second and third to that. And so that was April. The deadline for that was April. And in February of 2016, we were notified that we had in fact been accepted. And so we were voted in 17 projects. Yeah, it was February of 2017. So 17 projects were accepted at the state level out of 87 proposals, and the Douglas School, part of AB, was one of those projects. That kicks off a process and a timeline, and I know the committee's aware of most of this, but I just thought going into some of the background would be helpful. So we were accepted in February, and we were given a starting date of April 3rd, and we had 9 months, 270 days to hit a whole bunch of targets. I'm going to go into some detail about that. So we had Phase 1, we had Phase 2, we were accepted by the MSBA, and then in January of 2017, we formed the District Master Planning Review Committee, the DMPRC, and Mary led that process. And what came out of Phase 2 were really 6 options for the buildings that we have and what could happen to them, and then the 7th being keeping the buildings that we have and just doing the capital improvement plan. So we had 7 options, and we went out to the community to really look into those 7 options, get feedback, and figure out what the priorities were and where we should go from there in an effort to narrow down the options so that when we began talking to MSBA, we had something more narrow than these 7 options. So I know you all attended that part of the process. There were 12 forums held, day, night, staff, parents, community members, etc. I think of those forums as focus groups. So they tended to have a lot of discussion, a lot of pros and cons, and so on, and feedback. A video was created, and then there was written feedback from folks. It became obvious as we really dove into those 7 options that some of them were going to be removed anyway for lots of good reasons. And in the end, it was pretty clear that there were 2 options that were much more feasible than the rest. And so in June, you got a presentation from the DMPRC that recommended these 2 options. At the same time, we began working with the MSBA. And so we had to form our building committee by June, and we did that. And so then the building committee took it from there. And so tonight I'm going to give you an update on what the building committee has been up to through the summer and kind of where we go from here. These 2 charts, you've seen them many times, but I think they provide a good visual. This was really from Phase 1 of the project. And the color-coded red, yellow, green show red being the most significant need, yellow being medium, green being in pretty good shape. And so these are all of our 8 buildings. So the admin building and Blanchard, Conant, Douglas, Gates, McCarthytown, and Merriam being considered a single facility for this purpose, the junior high and the high school. And then the maintenance building, it's a small piece of it, but they also looked at that. And if you look at everything, this is looking at health, safety, welfare, code compliance, functional use, handicapped accessibility, maintenance, energy efficiency, and hazardous materials. The reds really are mostly falling at Conant, Douglas, and Gates, the admin building, and the maintenance building. Makes total sense. The junior high, the high school, McCarthy Town and Merriam were all built or renovated about 15 years ago. Blanchard was about 20 years ago. Douglas, Gates, and Conant have never had a major renovation. They're all approximately 50 years old. The square shows Conant, Douglas, and Gates being the schools determined most in need. The next slide talks about space issues, and this is an interesting thing. A lot of people think our enrollment has started to drop. We must have lots of space. But the needs of our kids have changed so significantly that, in fact, we don't have a lot of space. And the kinds of space we need for 250 English learners and for 17% of our students who have needs related to special education services is a lot different than it was 10, 15, and 20 years ago. So again, in the space area, Conant, Douglas, and Gates are significantly overcrowded. Okay, so now we're into the MSBA process. In February 2017, AcTON-BOXBOROUGH was accepted into the program. The eligibility period is 270 days. It started April 3rd, and it runs until January 3rd. So a lot has to be accomplished in that window. By June 3rd, we had to appoint the building committee. You guys did that at your May meeting. By July 3rd, there were two major documents that needed to be submitted. One was the EPQ, the educational profile, and the second was the enrollment data. The EPQ really was a document, and so we put that in the packet for you. So you can read through that. Hopefully you had a chance to do that. A team of us worked on that, Deb, Dawn, JD, Amy Bizowitz, and myself. And a lot of detail about our educational program, how our facilities are being used now, and how we envision them being used in the future. In that EPQ, we told them that we have two possible configuration options for the twin school that we're now talking about. The enrollment data I didn't put in your packet because it isn't really a report or a chart. It's a long series of requests for information. So we got the birth information from the two towns and housing starts and sales and turnovers and enrollment and so on. So they have all of that. They're processing those numbers, and then they'll be in touch with us, and then we get a meeting with them to talk about enrollment sometime before October 3rd. So October 3rd is the next big date in which, between now and then, we work with them to come to agreement over what our enrollment numbers are going to be for this project. All right? And then the other date on the calendar is December 4th, 2 town meetings, to a vote. I put vote to approve project. It's not the project, it's the feasibility money and the project manager money, and I have more detail about that coming up. So this is really the first module of our process with MSBA. All right, so when we get into the details about the projects, we know that both of the recommended options are a twin school. We know that we believe, Doran Whittier believes, that the Gates property is the most feasible feasible site for the twin school. So we're saying likely on the Gates property. We've spent time this summer looking more at Conant, understanding the difference between the Gates site and the Conant site. We have members of the building committee who have looked at all the properties in Acton and Boxborough, and town-owned land, school-owned land, land that could be bought. We've ruled out conservation-restricted land. The more we looked at Boxborough, the more we realized we're building a twin school, and to put 3 of the 6 AB elementary schools in Boxborough is probably not going to make a lot of sense, and it's actually going to throw the hometown guarantee into a problem for Acton families. So we don't really think it's feasible to build a twin school and to have 3 elementary schools in Boxborough. nor has there been land found that would be easily available for this purpose. So we're still back to Gates and possibly Conant. There were questions at one of the meetings about, somebody looked at the diagrams for Conant and thought there was more room there. All the overlays were not on the maps that they were looking at. And we pushed Doran Whittier on why Gates and not Conant. And there could be room at Conant, but you'd have to phase the kids. So there isn't room really to build beside Conant, separate, and then move the kids in. So that's one issue. We are looking at, though there's town-owned land, there are 2 baseball fields near Conant. And we want to look at that for wetlands and the like and see if there's any chance there. So there's a woman named Katie Raymond on the building committee who's a civil engineer, and she's done a great job spearheading, really looking at the land and the water flow and all of that. All right, so it's a twin school, likely on the Gates property. And we know that we need a solution for the preschool. That was evident from all of our conversations through the process. So whatever we do, that twin school is going to take care of the current Acton preschool that's in the admin building. So then we went further to look at the 2 possible options. And so the 2 options that were recommended in June, what I'll call the first option is a twin school with a K-6 elementary school on each side, plus classrooms for the preschool. The second option is a twin school with an early childhood center on one side. That early childhood center would take all the kindergartens from across both towns, as well as all the preschools across both towns. And that would be the early childhood center. It would end up with about 470 pre-K and K students. The other side of the twin school would be an elementary school that would be grades 1 to 6, because now all the kindergartens are on the second side. Everybody with me? So those are the 2 options. The more we pursued the options, the feedback about the early childhood center was mixed. Some people loved it, some people didn't. And we did think it provided some innovation and some new ways of thinking and doing things around here. The option with the early childhood center also means that we would move from 6 elementary schools to 5 elementary schools. And you might think, well, that's good because it'll save money to go from 6 to 5, but we actually still would have 6 schools, but it would be 5 elementary and 1 ECC. Moving from 6 to 5 would involve combining 2 school programs into 1. And so the more we looked at that, and the more we thought about what that would mean, and essentially combining 2 school communities into 1 school, last week the building committee looked at all of this and took a vote to recommend to the school committee that we eliminate this option and go with the other option, which is a twin school, K-6 on one side, K-6 on the other side. If it's on the Gates campus, it's really Douglas on one side, Gates on the other side. So we won't have the ECC, but we also won't be going from 6 schools to 5.
But you said K-6 on each side, but it's plus the preschool.
Plus the preschool. Thank you, Mary. Yes. So here's the recommendation. A little bit of detail about this. It was actually August 9th. I guess it was more than a week ago. So the building committee would like the school committee to consider this option. Think about it. Talk about it tonight. You know, we'll get some feedback from the community, and at your next meeting, we'd like to ask you to think about voting it. And Jason's... Okay, sure. Jason Cole is on the building committee. He's also on the Acton Finance Committee, and...
Sorry to interrupt, I didn't get the slide to you in time. These are the final points that we wanted to make sure that we get across. While we were interested in the possible educational benefits of an ECC, we felt that the research was inconclusive and did not outweigh the benefits of establishing a child in the specific school community right at the time of kindergarten. The decision to bring the pre-K classrooms, as she was just saying, was an acceptable increase to the new twin school size and removes much of the capital improvement plan that was required for the admin building. This keeps kindergarten in Boxborough, which we felt protected us against a hometown guarantee in the case of a mandate change where kindergarten would have to become part of the mandated services, so this would be able to stay in Boxborough. And as she was just describing, there are less moving parts in school rebalancing by leaving the same amount of school choice options and avoiding disruption in different communities at the time of the occupancy. For this and other reasons, the vote was unanimous. Sorry to interrupt and jump in, but I didn't get this to you in time.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so to further define what we're talking about, the project that's being recommended to the school committee for your consideration, a twin school for 2 K-6 elementary schools. The Gates property is the most likely site. We'll continue to explore Conant or other possible sites. The Gates and Douglas property, this is an important point, will be treated as a campus. The building would be built on the Gates side. Parking and playgrounds would be built on the Douglas site. There will also be room for some parking and possibly some play space on the Gates side, but we're thinking of the whole property. A better walkable bridge would connect the 2 sites, and of course through feasibility we'll get into exactly how much we can provide that. So I know there was a lot of concern about West Acton now supporting this number of kids, but they're already supporting this number of kids. They're just in 2 different schools. It'll be 1 school, and we're going to keep that Douglas side to help make it work. Douglas would move into one side of the new school, Gates would move into the other side. And then I get into the preschool in just a minute. If it ended up at Conant, of course it would be Douglas and Conant. Okay? But based on everything that came out of the Dorn-Whittier study, we're thinking that Gates is going to be the best location. So each of these schools, 21 classrooms for K through 6. So they would each be 3-section schools. We're estimating about 420 kids in each school. 420 to 450 could be a range. That's 20 to 23 kids in each class. So 7 grades, 3 sections. 8 preschool classrooms would be built along with support services for the pre-K students, such as speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. Preschool students would also have access to art, music, and phys ed the same way they do at Blanchard, but the way they don't have in the admin building. We haven't gotten fully into the detail about, we're trying to envision, can the 8 pre-K classrooms be together? Maybe 3 or 4 belong to each school so that they're part of art, music, and PE in each of those schools, but they're also their own community. That's kind of how we're thinking, but of course design is a big, long process, so we'll see how that goes. And at 5:15 tonight, we got Dorn-Whittier to give us a number. So we went back and had them re-estimate. So this is a bigger school than we had originally been talking about, but it takes care of our pre-K and it integrates them into our elementary schools, which is going to be wonderful. And that means that the admin building isn't going to need to be renovated in the way that it would if it were supporting students in program. All right, we'll probably still keep central office in the admin building and some other kinds of programs, but we're not going to have to renovate it to be an appropriate preschool, and those kids will be integrated into an elementary school. So we feel pretty good about this solution. So the cost estimates are high-level cost estimates. Feasibility is a big process that gets us to a good cost estimate, but it's $123 million, which is a little higher than the twin school was before. But again, we added, first of all, enough room for the kids we think we're actually going to have based on the enrollment we've been having, so really 3-section schools. And we added 120 preschool students, up to 120 preschool students. And then when you take the $123 million, the rate of reimbursement from MSBA, we all know we have to be careful about that number. We don't know. It depends what you run into in the project. It is a percentage of the number of the amount of reimbursable expenses. So we're estimating 40 to 45%, which is roughly around 50 million. So 49 to 55 million will be paid for by the state if we get approval from our two communities. After that, 85% of the rest of it roughly will be Acton cost, which is 58 to 63 million, and 15% roughly would be Boxborough cost, 10 to 11 million. These are preliminary high-level numbers, okay? We will now go to both communities and get tax impact information now that we have one project and numbers, all right? One more piece to this is how much we're going to ask for the feasibility study and project manager fees and how we're going to pay for it, all right? So we're estimating approximately $1.3 million. That was done with an extensive study of what other projects have cost at this phase. And 45.3% of that will be reimbursed. That's a solid number. So MSBA has given us the reimbursement rate for this phase of the project, which includes the feasibility costs and the project manager costs. So 590 would be reimbursed. The region's responsible for 710,000. There's a reason Dave and I went back to back here. So given the good news about the turnbacks in the state of E&D, we'd like to recommend that we take the 710,000 out of E&D. So E&D is estimated to come in once certified at about $4 million. The 710 could come out of that. You'd still be at 3.3 million, which is roughly 3.5%, 3 to 3.5%, instead of 4.4%. So if approved by both towns, the 710 coming out of E&D, we'd be asking for a majority vote from Acton and Boxborough at town meeting. A lot of towns have to borrow at this stage. That's a 2/3 vote, and you're borrowing. So we're lucky that our reserves are healthy, and we can do this. If the two towns approve on December 4th, we move into Module 2, which is the feasibility study. We work with MSBA, we hire an owner's project manager, and we move forward. We are limited by the 270-day window. So if we can't get approval before January 3rd, that's the end of the 270 days, then we're back at square one with a statement of interest with MSBA, which would put us back quite a bit of time if we got approved. All right? So I wanted to sort of pull it all together and give you an update. We're excited to have Bill joining the building committee with all of his experience. And we have a few things that Mary's going to talk about in terms of building committee membership, but I think it would be good to take a break here and get your feedback about all of this.
So who's chairing the building
I think you're jumping ahead. We're going to get to that. We're getting to
Yeah,
that.
so after we do this, you guys are going to talk about building committee membership, chairmanship, et cetera.
So for the feasibility study, we get the reimbursement rate of 45.3. Is that indicative of what we might expect for the construction phase?
Do you want to answer that?
Oops, I'm sorry. Not necessarily. The reimbursement is based on a formula. There's the base rate, and then there are other opportunities to increase the reimbursement rate depending on certain aspects of the project, and those will be fleshed out and would be fleshed out during the feasibility study phase. The MSBA does commit upfront to the cost of the feasibility study, Module 2, and so we know, as Marie had indicated, that that reimbursement percent is based on their formula for that Module 2.
So it's kind of a different formula for different purposes. The feasibility study is a fairly small, relatively small effort and that can be fairly well defined. And the other, I guess, it must be a different formula.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and review that, frankly, the exact nuances between the differences. But I know from my past experience on 2 projects, the Module 2 feasibility percentage wasn't, the construction reimbursement for the full project was different than the feasibility piece.
My understanding is the formula's the same, but they recalculate it. So the values in the formula could have changed. So like it's, you know when we do the amount of state funds we get, the cherry sheet, it's the earnings in the community and taxes, and it's those kind of elements, but it could change over time, so it's recalculated. So there's that piece. Then, as Bill said, there are some pieces where if we do things they like, we could get a little added incentive. But there's also, say we decided to build a swimming pool that they don't want to support, then they don't pay for any of that, so it feels like it pulls down the rate. So and this is what we're really cautious about with the community. It's not a clear cut. Here's the rate, and whatever number we come up with, it's calculated off of that. We have to be very careful how we talk about all this.
I'm actually encouraged to see that the rate was 40 to 45% as opposed to something lower than that, because early on I had 35% in my head, so this is a little more favorable than I thought. So.
I just want to say I'm thrilled that the building committee was at this stage able to get us down to a single plan. I think it makes it much cleaner going into the fall as we get ready to sell for town meeting. So I'm thrilled to support the single plan moving forward.
I'll say that the building committee met multiple times over the summer, and so thank you all so much for doing it. I wasn't even at the last couple of meetings. They worked really hard to get us down to this one option.
I totally sold Katie on the ECC, and then we took it away from her.
So I have some questions about what our next steps are, because you're saying the 1.3 will include the project manager and feasibility study, right? That's the 1.3 million. I like the idea that the 2 schools. I do get concerns, and I think one of the questions that's going to come up with these slides, and that's why I'm wondering if these are the slides, or what do you go to next? Like at once the decision's kind of made, and then we start doing the outreach to the community. I know that they struggle at the twin school right now with sharing of gym space and stuff. So I would imagine if you're going to put early childhood and say it's being used at one school, I would imagine maybe it's used at both schools. Just those things to think about, because I know that's been a huge pushback when we mention the twin schools. You hear all the issues right now with our twin school. It's making sure that we understand that sharing of resources has caused a lot of, issues within the school. So we need to be able to answer those questions before we go out to the community of how those resources are being shared. So that leads me to the next question is, when we start, so are we sitting here at this meeting and saying, because I love the idea, I know people were concerned about losing a school. I think it would be overcrowded if we went down a school. Are we kind of saying go ahead here, and then are we doing outreach? Like what is?
So we are going to process this and vote, hopefully be able to vote it at our next meeting on September the 7th. So from now until September the 7th meeting, we have some time to process it.
So we have a couple things. So I do have a next step slide, but first let's address the twin school questions.
Yeah, so A couple things. So understanding the money that's going to be asked for at December 4th is feasibility and project manager funds. It will not be the full design. Okay, so we won't know how the cafeteria is situated. We're going to know, is this land a good piece of land? And we're going to know more specifics, but probably not that detail. So I wanted to say that. We have a huge amount of information, though, on the challenges that the current twin school has faced. Teachers have given us a document, some community members have. We have all of that, and we will bring that to the design phase so that we can learn as best as possible. MSBA is at the table, and so they'll have constraints, but we will bring that knowledge to this process. And then just so be clear, what we want to know next time is, do you as a committee approve going forward with the one option rather than the two? Because it will affect our outreach, which we'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes.
So that at least clarified one thing, which is our outreach is, showing the plan, not full detail of layout and stuff, and explaining, yes, there, a lot of things there that are going to be well thought out with the building, but we're truly only asking, I guess, for the 1.3 million for the December 4th meeting, right? That's what we're asking for at the December 4th meeting, not, 55 million at one town, 10 to 11 million.
Correct, and we're actually, the local cost is 710,000.
Which we're saying, if you approve it, won't be a cost to the town. There'll be no added extra cost because we're using.
It's always a cost.
No, I know.
That 710 could go to something else. So
Right.
It is the community's money. It's sitting in E&D. It is a cost, but it won't add to taxes.
That's the thing is
Right.
is that it won't be an additional tax cost going into the next year that we're saying, we're going to pull from this just to do the study and hire the person. That's what. Thank you.
So just a couple of things. I really like the plan. I think it's great. It'll be interesting over time to see how moving the preschool to 2 sites impacts kindergarten choice going forward, because now you're not going to have 1 site moving to 5 or 6. You're going to have 2 sites in 2 schools. And so, how, I don't know if that was discussed at all, but it will be interesting. I'm sure that's going to have an impact on school choice, particularly on the Acton side, but that's okay. I think getting the kids out of where they are and into good space is really important, and this is a great way to do it. It's very efficient. It's a little tricky when you're talking about which site, and it's going to impact which are the double schools. So I think in the communication, we just have to be clear that whatever school is not part of the new double school will have its own capital, efforts that'll happen. But I think this is a really clear way to go to the community. I think it's very understandable, and it doesn't have some of the baggage that an ECC has in terms of trying to sell it. So it's good.
I'm still mourning the loss of the ECC. I think I'm not over saying goodbye to it. I thought that might be the direction a committee went in. I just still think having it gives us room to do things with the younger kids. It prevents the twin school issues that you might have in a twin elementary. It reduces or changes the amount of traffic that will come into West Acton. I think there are so many benefits to the ECC, and I have to say I'm sorry to see it eliminated. And I wondered about the research. Jason said that there's not enough research to support pursuing this, but I wonder if there was research that negated pursuing it, that said that it wasn't, a better educational or more sound model.
And we can also ask Deb to speak to this for a minute. Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, actually, there was research on both sides, and I wasn't the one that read this particular segment, so I'm speaking a little out of school here, but there was research on both sides, and the people that were tasked with looking at it in particular came back and said, meh, it's mixed, it's both sides. It's like 2 economists, 3 opinions. There were some that fervently said there was an academic benefit, and there were also ones that said you better to get the kids into the school that they're going to be in longer term. So it ended up being truly mixed and inclusive, and that's why the one, and I'll let the professionals speak to it. I hope I haven't said anything too wrong.
Other than it.
Very technical term of man.
Sure, I'll absolutely agree with him. There was nothing conclusive either way. There was nothing that came out longitudinally that said one way was better than the other. It depended really upon what the circumstances you were looking at, what outcomes you wanted. There was evidence to support any real conclusions. So there was nothing that was definitive on the research.
Can I just add, from the community feedback we got, it was about 50-50, but when we cut it by residents versus teachers, the teachers were slightly more in favor. It was about 60-40 in favor of the ECC, where residents were the opposite. And because residents need to support this at this town meeting and a future town meeting, we put more weight there.
One of the things I like in Acton is that we do things differently, and I would have liked to see us push the envelope a little bit more here and to see something that's a more unusual model. So I'm just expressing my disappointment. I'm really grateful for all the work that went into this, and
I'm with you,
I
Maya.
thank the committee.
I think we gave it the really strong college try.
So I wanted to echo what Maya was saying, because I went to one of the forums, and I really didn't know one way or the other whether I should support the ECC or not. And after hearing some of the benefits of teacher collaboration and that kind of stuff, I was sold on it. So it would be tough to let it go.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add my one more thing, which was, I am sad about the ECC. I agree with you. But I would like somewhere that we reiterate, as opposed to verbally, that there is a savings as well, regardless with the ECC or just having the preschool out of the admin building. It, first saves the cost. I mean, that needs to be a bullet point that, that's one less capital improvement, or less. It's just less of a capital improvement later on when it comes to the admin building. And like you said, because I hadn't even thought of that, we really do need to answer the question, because research, you had just stated and reiterated it, research suggests that you want to get them into the school right away. Well, now you're getting them into a school, but you might swap them into another school. So we just have to be prepared just for those questions, right? Because we're going to have all of our preschools in one, in this one building, and then send them other places, which is what we do now.
But you already have that, right?
Right, we already do that now, but
It's not attached to another building.
right,
Right.
right. It's just that they bond with that building, and some get to stay, and some don't.
I also didn't get to mourn aloud the benefit of the space gained in the 5 other schools.
Okay, go ahead, Bridget. I have 2 more slides, but
Okay, I was just going to make a comment back that we're losing that, but we're also going to be losing having the preschoolers cross a street to go to their playground. The driveway every time I walk up to the administration building.
and they don't have art, music, and PE. And
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I think no matter what we do, if it's thoughtful, and I have confidence in the building committee, this is going to be a tremendous benefit for the community, and we'll get used to it. It'll be different, but we'll get used to it.
So just to reiterate timeline and next steps. So I know this is a lot of information. It's kind of a new way to think about what we're doing. We want to give you a little bit of time here. And you never vote on a big thing on your first meeting anyway. We're actually going to present this as having been recommended to the school committee to staff at all staff day next week. So Bill and I are collaborating and sharing what we're going to say to faculty, and so that'll be a good way to gauge response as well. I think people are going to get really excited. It now feels more real and more doable, and so we're looking for community feedback, for committee feedback, and so on. We definitely have to begin a significant community outreach process, and that's not really the building committee's responsibility, and so I think that people need to really think about some community members coming forward to kind of lead some outreach around this in preparation for the town meetings. And then the way the timeline goes, if it's approved in December, we go into feasibility. Feasibility lasts 12 to 18 months. That gets us, that will go from January 2018 until the spring of 2019. Right? At that point, once feasibility is completed, we'll be ready for the votes on the actual funding of the project. And so that will be mid to late 2019, calendar year 2019. It will require town meeting votes in both towns and a Prop 2.5 capital override in both towns. Right, so we're talking mid to late 2019. And then if approved, the construction starts mid to late 2019, takes 2 to 2.5 years. So we're looking at about calendar year 2021. So that's how we get to the 7-year window. We've been at it for 2 years. And so that's just laying out the timeline. And not to forget the rest of the master plan. So if this goes forward and it's Gates and Douglas in West Acton, then there will still be a need to renovate Conant. It could possibly be the next MSBA project. Somewhere in here I reminded folks, one of the main reasons to do the twin school is that MSBA looks very favorably upon one project at a time. They may consider Conant while we're still involved with the twin school, but not very likely. So by doing the twin school, we're taking care of Gates and Douglas in the first phase, all right? And then there's been a lot of work done. You had a presentation on the remainder of the capital improvement plan, the CIP, for all the other schools. We've prioritized between 14 and 20 million. I remember that number was 120, but taking care of these 3 schools is a big part of it, or at least 2 of them. So we'll be talking more over the next year about how to take care of the 14 to 20 million through some kind of bonding, and again, requesting it from the towns. So let's not forget about that. So that took longer than I thought. Mary has some other things. I'll take a seat and we can answer other questions. Thank you.
Before I get to the committee membership update, I do want to point out that when Marie submitted the enrollment data, she did what I would call enrollment plus. So they have very specific things they asked for, and she provided that. But the data they asked for is fairly old, and we know, as we're hearing, like, oh my gosh, we have to add a kindergarten classroom, we're over 50 kids, this and that. Our numbers, even though we've been talking declining, they've been increasing. And so she provided extra data and has chatted with them, and it sounds like they're going to consider that. So that'll be part of that October meeting, is really a nice negotiation with them, so that drives how many, the square footage that they'll fund. So it's a really important number for us. So that brings us to the building committee membership update. So the first thing we have to do is, if you think way back, there's a form we had to fill out with all the membership positions. There were specific positions that MSBA is looking for, and the superintendent actually fills like 3 or more of those positions. And with Bill on board, I think we should formally vote him onto the building committee to fulfill those roles. We've had Marie as interim so that we've always been up to date with the MSBA, haven't missed a beat, but it would be appropriate for us to vote Bill into that position.
Okay, looking for a motion.
Marie would
you have a
stay on
question?
it though, right?
Marie absolutely stays on it.
Okay.
She was already a member on the committee.
Right, so we're just adding someone now.
Right,
So I
and-
move to put Bill on the committee.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Okay, so one of the greatest losses of Christina resigning is Christina was chairing this committee. And so we need a new chair for this committee.
I was wondering, the last building committee was chaired by, I think, is it Stuntz? I'm not, okay. And I know that I think that she one time served on the school committee, but wasn't on school committee when she chaired the building committee. So does it have to be a school committee member that chairs that?
Is she on the committee right now? So, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to have someone who's currently on the committee move into chairing it, just because there's been a lot of work and a lot of understanding and a lot of history that's been built up the past few months. I think I'd prefer to remain consistent with who's on the committee, and then all those people have been very involved if they're willing to chair, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask Mary if she would be willing to do that, with the understanding that you just came off as chairing the entire committee, and it's been a really rough, busy time.
So I would say it makes a lot of sense with my involvement from the earlier stages. It's a funny thing when I think about it. I said to Marie, like, should I consider this? It makes sense. It feels funny to me as someone from Boxborough to chair a building committee that's going to build a building in Acton. But I've also been a part of a small company that merged into a larger group, and we've always been called the other company. And at some point it's a team, and you're part of the team. I've been there 14 years. I think it took 12, and now they think of us as part of everything. So in the sense of a team, I would be willing to do it. But I would also say that if at any time the committee said, okay, now there's an Acton person who really feels up to speed, and we want to revote it, that would be perfectly fine with me. I have plenty of things to do in my life that I don't need to chair this for the next 6 years.
But while I understand, but if the school's being picked in Acton only because we're trying to guarantee hometown guarantee, and we're taking two elementary schools that are in Acton. Otherwise, to me, yeah, we have different votes, but we're all one committee. So whether someone's from Boxborough or Acton,
It's more selling it to Acton town people. I don't know, Acton and Boxborough are quite different politically, and I know the Boxborough community, so the Acton people are going to have to work hard to sell it, because I'm not going to be able to sell this to the Acton community as an outsider.
So my personal view is that it should be somebody with experience from Acton. Like I get what you're saying, and call me crazy, and you probably call me crazy, but Marie, I don't know exactly how this would maybe change up the whole configuration of the committee, but is this something that you would consider, chairing the committee? Kind of being the face of it?
So I really think that the chair of the building committee is a community outreach, somewhat political position. I think it's better for it to be a school committee member or a community member. That being said, Bill and I are going to support the chair and the building committee in any way that we can. So I don't really think it's appropriate for me to chair the building committee, but we'll be happy to support whoever does.
I just don't have the bandwidth to take this on. That's why I'm angry that they cut off the head of this committee as well. Christina did a lot of work. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that we just lost. But I can't be the one to step.
I would have to talk at home. If I helped you chair, right, you chair, I mean, I would have to talk at home to pull myself from other roles. Again, because Christina did so much, and it needs to be reiterated over and over what she was doing. But as long as you chaired, I'd consider helping, but again, having you chair, I don't know. I would have to go back and look.
Well, aren't we going to need another Acton member on the committee anyway, right? So,
So I will just say that I talked with Beth about putting that on the agenda tonight, and I suggested to her to not put it on the agenda tonight until you see who your other member is. Because if you recall, so when Christina got on as chair of this committee, she dropped almost every other role she had. If one of you are going to step on to this, and that'd be great, maybe you want to see who that other person is and what you might give up. So I thought we'd wait till the next meeting, but it's something, it fits under the topic we're discussing now. If you guys want to put someone forward, I think you do need another Acton person on there. Amy's on it, but that's it, and you need another Acton person. And so you can pick someone tonight, or you can wait and see who your other person is and how you guys want to juggle things.
Could someone articulate times or when this committee generally meets?
It meets once a month for 2 hours, but then there's a working group, that a working subcommittee that meets, is it twice a month? Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks
During
there's
the
a
day.
subcommittee, yep.
During the day, and then there's a lot of homework that happens, and there's going to be community outreach and forums. I personally am a firm believer that you educate people before town meeting. You do not educate on town meeting floor, and so that education has to happen before December 4th and the subsequent requests that we'll make.
When we talk about community outreach, this is a great opportunity to engage we have some different groups. We have the PTOs, which work within the schools and everything, and then getting out of the school. So in a way, the community outreach. Remember, we've talked about this, but it ends up combining with that PTO joint group, and that. So maybe that's a way of alleviating, kind of subcommittees.
Unfortunately, Christina was doing the outreach as well. Some of that.
Right, but so I've been doing with Diane, and Tess is doing it this year. So we have 3 of us now doing the PTOs, and that can be increased a bit more because we meet with the PTOs once a month. So. And we ramp up, and the focus this year with the PTOs would be this whole community outreach. I mean, we wouldn't go through what we go through right now with the PTOs. It would be a firm focus on this. And that's the only reason that ends up making me interested with building committee is jumping off the other committees. But it's the community outreach with the PTOs and then the community.
Can I make a suggestion? It's getting late. What if we do have to update the MSBA on the membership of the building committee? We need to have a superintendent identified there as well as a chair. What if you were to make Mary the chair or the acting chair, and all of you think about it for the next month or so, see who your new member is, think about roles and responsibilities given the changes, and then maybe somebody from Acton co-chairs it from that point forward. And you're talking about 2 town meetings. You're going to have, they're simultaneous. You're going to need people presenting in both towns. And so maybe you have an Acton and a Boxborough co-chair going forward, and think about that over the next month. But give yourself some time to look at what else you're doing and who's doing what and all that.
Brigid?
if that's acceptable to Mary, I would make a motion to appoint you as the acting chair of the building committee with gratitude.
All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, pass. Is there anything else, or are we ready to move on? Yes, okay, Paul.
They really don't know how much damage they did to the district.
Okay. So I think we're going to move on to item number 13. So let me ask Marie. Marie, yeah.
So do you want me to take this item? Okay. So I put a handout on the table for the committee members. I wanted to make a proposal to the committee that we consider a stipend for the acting superintendent, Marie, from the period of time that she served. It became clear to me when Amy was away, and I spent a lot of time in central office, aside from that, number one, we had somebody doing two jobs for a period of, close to 2 months, comes out to 39 days. And it became clear to me that the number of hours that Marie was working was just untenable, first of all, including weekends, nights. I mean, she took vacation and wasn't on vacation. She was on the phone with me. Pretty much every day she was gone, not to mention the other people in the central office. So I think it's the right thing to do. I feel bad that we didn't think of it ahead of time. I put together just a real quick spreadsheet that's on the table, just with some comparable numbers. Marie's current annual salary is $149,913. You'll see that in the top row. Our former superintendent was at $192,816. Our interim superintendent is at $185 annualized, and with the stipend, it comes out to $191 annualized. And if you look at those annual salaries on a per diem basis, you can see the next line. It's a difference of a couple of $100 on an annual. On a per diem basis for the salary. So what I did was look at the differential between what Marie's current salary is and what the superintendent's salary is, and that's the third line down, which is roughly between $165 and $134 a day. And if you multiply that out times 39 work days, which is the period of time in which Marie served, the numbers highlighted in yellow give you a basis for a differential. I'm not suggesting that that's the right number, but that's at least the right number, I would think. So if you base the difference on our former superintendent's salary, it would be $6,435 and some cents. And based on the interim superintendent's salary, it's $6,163 and some cents. So I just wanted to get the committee's feeling on whether this is appropriate from our standpoint, but I certainly saw, and you could see from tonight, the number of initiatives that were the superintendent's initiatives that have not stalled. They've continued to move forward. All of the hiring, save one position, has been done. I mean, there's been a yeoman's amount of work completed over the course of the summer without missing a beat, so.
I'm just going to add to that. Marie was on vacation on a cruise ship outside Canada, and she was on the phone with me 3 or 4 times every single day, as well as with multiple other people. So this is like she would lose signal, then she had to call me back. She worked the whole time she was away.
I agree, Brigid, and I wish we had thought of this earlier, but I have a question for you. The bottom line is another number, and I don't understand what that number is.
So all I did was take the per diem, I took the entire superintendent salary and figured out what that would be if you did a per diem for 39 days. So that's what you would have paid a superintendent in addition. I'm not suggesting that that's the right amount for a stipend for Marie, but that's just a comparison on what a full superintendent's salary would be based on those per diems, as opposed to a differential. Does that make sense?
So we can decide anywhere in between.
It's up to the committee. If you think about the differential based on, just take the highest number, 6,435. If you were to pay that as a stipend out, essentially you're compensating the person at the higher of the salaries between superintendent and her current deputy superintendent salary. So it's just a starting place.
So I'm in favor of giving her the maximum amount.
Yeah, she was doing a job. We absolutely have to compensate her for it. And I think a more realistic number, like had we knocked back our timeline 2 months and brought Bill on July 1st, our difference in what we would be spending is the $28,650. And I don't think we can justify giving her that much, but I think that the $6,100 is too little. And so I don't know what the happy medium is, but.
Just curious, because she's the deputy superintendent, is there language in the contract about what happens financially if a deputy superintendent has to step up?
And so the work she did over this 39 days, was that kind of contract work that was in her contract, or did she elect to do extra work that wasn't necessarily required? Just because she felt like, I don't know, morally, or she felt like it needed the attention. I mean,
Well, the work that she was doing was to continue moving forward those things that the superintendent would have been putting his attention to, like making sure the building project didn't falter, making sure that the other initiatives that were mentioned at our previous meeting didn't falter. So it's extra work, but she was voted in as the acting superintendent.
So I absolutely appreciate all the hard work she does. In absence of anything contractual, and in light of the fact that we had 2 line items in the financial report that indicated we have 2 kind of big areas that we can't, that need immediate fiscal attention that we can't cover, I'm reluctant to approve this. I appreciate the hard work. We didn't ask her to do any more than her job. And so the fact that she elected to, and then we want to compensate her in retrospect, especially for things like initiatives that she alone wasn't working on. I imagine it was a collaborative effort. So I guess I don't want to say no outright, but I guess I need more information about what it says in her contract and what exactly it is that she did that was above and beyond to merit this extra pay.
Well, she served as both the acting superintendent and as the deputy superintendent, had responsibility for all of her original responsibilities, including all of the hiring, all of the personnel matters, et cetera, as well as supporting the committee, which is not part of her job, moving ahead the building initiatives, and certainly none of it's done alone. We've got a great central office staff, without a doubt. What exactly in terms of more information do you want? I mean, a list of tasks, a list of accomplishments. I'm not sure what else to.
I guess I would want to look at her job description as deputy superintendent. My understanding was, in the absence of a superintendent, she is the superintendent, and that is embedded in her job description. So I don't have anything to look at to kind of wrap my head around why the additional compensation.
I think, can I answer that again? So in my opinion, that's true. She does step in when the superintendent's out, but that's not, the assumption is not that, and at at least as far as I'm concerned, that she would continue to do two jobs. So if you're stepping into a second role, who's going to do the job that you were hired to do in the first place? Now, maybe the district feels that that's appropriate. I personally don't. I don't think that's fair to the district or to the personnel that we're hiring. I mean, we didn't miss a beat, which is terrific, and that's, you know, a testament to the professionalism. But I personally think it's the right thing to do to compensate someone fairly for doing more than they've been asked to do. And I think, you know, that's what she was doing. So.
So I mean, she was going above and beyond. I'm very torn. I just want to make sure, because we have a few interims, but they're not keeping their current roles, right? So the people who are jumping into the interim principal is no longer the assistant and doing those jobs, right? That interim is only doing the principal job, and then the person now that's the assistant, you know the chain. But each person's only doing their new job. Nobody's hanging on to two jobs, right? So we're not setting any precedent so that someone else says, well, I'm doing. But are we setting a precedent that says now this interim principal is, because are we compensating the interim principal with a higher salary because he had a salary as an assistant? Well, that's what I'm wondering. It brings up those questions of how each person who's jumping into a new role, how are we handling that? You know, are we opening up Pandora's box kind of thing?
I don't know the answer to that, because we don't set the salaries for the principals, but we do set the salary for the superintendent and the deputy superintendent, so I'm sure we can get the answer to that question, and I would hope that if someone is being put in a position like the acting principal for the school, I would hope that this was part of the conversation for those people too. I don't know if it was, but.
Well, we would ask, yeah, Marie, but go ahead.
Two comments. So one is that I think if we had had Marie in the acting superintendent role longer, we would have replaced her other position in some temporary capacity. And so I do think even though it says there's this transition, I don't think it's fair to say, okay, now here's two jobs. I mean, what if we asked her to do that for a year or 2 years? It just wouldn't be realistic. So I do think she worked above and beyond, not because she thought it was the right thing to do, but because we were asking her to do that. And it goes beyond the scope of her contract. So I'm in support of it. And then secondly, in terms of the availability of funds, although Dave did left us on that little negative note, highlighted a couple of unanticipated expenses, because we accelerated capital and paid some of the 18 capital work in 17, I believe there's resources to cover this and to cover the additional interim superintendent salary that we have.
What is the structure if a principal suddenly has to take a 6-week leave of absence for medical reasons? The assistant principal steps up and someone steps up to the assistant principal's position, or the assistant principal just takes over principalship of the school?
I can tell you that in my years of experience, a long-term leave like you just mentioned, typically it's really very standard practice in school districts to provide some kind of extra compensation most especially when an administrator takes on the role of the head of whether it's a school or certainly the district. So this notion of considering additional compensation for Marie in her role as acting superintendent, I would tell you, is very standard practice. And in fact, in the role of acting superintendent, she took on all of the responsibility that a permanent superintendent or an interim superintendent by virtue of that. And you know, the responsibility is extensive. You could go 39 days with nothing happening in a district, but the fact is there are hundreds of decisions that in this case Marie was making over the period of that time that she otherwise wouldn't be making as the deputy superintendent. So she was in fact doing both jobs during that time. So just from my experience, the notion of paying a stipend for someone who steps up into that into that role certainly is warranted. I think it was stated earlier that somebody stated, "I wish we had thought of this when back at the beginning of July," and you know there was just an awful lot going on, and so now it has come up. In my opinion, I think it's very appropriate for the committee to consider that. And furthermore, I don't know the answer to this, and we can get this information, but I would believe that that at the high school, the interim principal salary has been adjusted, and I would think that certainly, as superintendent, what I would have been doing, if that helps.
I'm concerned of the message it sends not doing this.
The person whose contract states has to step up. I mean, and I think Marie is amazing, and this has been a seamless transition. I just want to think about what this means, you know, in terms of precedent. Really, truly, I actually am in favor of this, but I just want to be careful.
The contract to me, when it says that she's to step in when the superintendent isn't there, is when he goes on vacation for a week. It's not when the school committee votes to make her acting superintendent. You know, I think it's two different things we're talking about.
I agree we should do it. I just want to state, because we can't talk out of both sides of our mouth. When we put Marie in the interim, we did say that that's part of her job, and we knew it was going to be for the summer. So at that time, we did say, because she's the deputy superintendent, she's now taking this role, and it was a natural progression. So we can't say, do you know what I mean? We said at that time that was part of being a deputy superintendent, was to jump in the role. I do feel, and based off of what you said as well, if a principal's being compensated, you know, someone's moving to that position and they're not even taking two jobs, then they should be compensated for it, right? The interim principal, the interim assistant principal, and as a result, this was extended. And had we not had so many initiatives, I mean, it was crazy what was going on this summer. And just due to that as well, I mean, it was just a crazy summer. It just seems justifiable, because I would hate, like Paul said, what we're sending to people who have been working really hard in this district, that we can't acknowledge, you know, above and beyond what we should have expected from people.
So I really appreciate you, Bill, telling us what is best practice and standard. It's actually extremely helpful to know, because it just seems like it's coming out of left field. Is it standard to build that into the contract, or is that just some kind of done on a handshake typically, or?
No, I think it's fair to say that the language, and I haven't seen the language, but if there's language in the deputy superintendent's contract that speaks to, you know, acts in the absence of the superintendent, what that really means literally is if there's a decision that has to be made where the superintendent cannot make that decision because they're out of town, they're on vacation, they can't, you know, they're out ill, That's typically what those clauses really address. It's in the absence of the superintendent. In the case that you have here, there wasn't a superintendent. The committee actually voted to name her acting superintendent. And again, I think perhaps at a different time, when there may not have been so much going on, when you appointed her as acting, typically there would be a discussion about an additional compensation to take on that role, it is a different role. I mean, here the deputy and the superintendent have worked close together, and I think that's a great system. But having been voted and actually being the superintendent for that period of time, there is a difference. I would, again, my opinion is that additional compensation is certainly warranted.
So can I move to approve the proposed stipend for
I think we need a number.
$6,163.05, and just meet in the middle?
I think that's too low, 6,000.
Okay, let's not bicker over $300. I move to approve the proposed stipend for Ms. Altieri for acting superintendent position for $6,435.45.
I'll second.
I think all of those $6,000 are too low.
Should we vote?
There's a motion on the table. Is there any more discussion before we vote? Brigid?
Paul, do you want to propose a friendly amendment? I don't know if it would be accepted, but it's worth a try.
I was going to, I was going to start by offering 20, so I think that's quite a bit different than what is proposed, so I'm not sure that's a friendly amendment.
So you do not want to?
Yeah, I'll propose it.
I think it needs to be a little bit more formal than that.
I would ask that we amend that proposal to read 20,000 instead of 6,000 and change.
Just point of order, I think with Robert's rules, so for an amendment, I think someone seconds it, and then we vote on the amendment.
Yes.
And then, so we don't need the original motion maker to approve it. We just need a second and then a vote on that amendment. And if that gets voted down, then we would vote on my original motion.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, thank goodness. Beth, we miss you.
All right. So I will second Paul's motion.
Discussion on the amended motion.
Okay. Let's have discussion. Is there any discussion on the amended motion?
So, a question. So how did you come up with 20? Does that just, it seems more reasonable to you for the amount?
She took on a lot of work at a time where it was very difficult to take on that work. I think 6K would be in this one.
Maya?
I'm just going to say that I think that's too high, and also I'm curious if in the 39 days she had a vacation during those, and in which case $20,000 is just...
She worked through her vacation. She was on a cruise ship calling school multiple times a day.
Spending money,
Yeah.
paying for a cruise ship.
I was on the phone with her too,
I was too.
I'm sure.
Deanne?
Because I feel like we're at a bidding gallery. Can I ask what, since you have experience in this, what have you seen? I feel like we're working here from nothing, and as much as I appreciate Marie and all the work she did, and I really want her to be compensated, I want this to be, I don't want to be voting out of guilt or anything. We all know that she's unbelievably valued, and we want to make sure she feels valued, but I still want to, this isn't our money, this is taxpayer money, so I want to understand what makes sense.
So the practice of additional compensation, in my experience, certainly is standard. The amount of that additional compensation, I don't think there is a standard formula other than the length of time that a person serves in that role is a factor. If an individual were serving in that role for the entire year, then I think clearly the per diem, the full per diem numbers that Brigid had put out on that bottom line would certainly make sense to me. But I think the amount of time spent in that role is a consideration that committees would typically consider. So I'm sorry, I don't have a specific number to provide you.
Can I just just throwing out a couple of more numbers. If you talk about $8,000, that's about 5% of her current salary. $10,000 is about 6.5% of her current salary. So I think 20 sounds high to me from 39 days. 6 sounds low to me. Somewhere between 8 and 10 sounds reasonable to me, and I think is a fair number.
So if you wanted to make that, can she do a friendly amendment?
So I believe we have to vote the amendment that's on the table, but then we could re-amend the motion.
Let's vote the amendment. That's fine.
Paul's amendment to the amendment is the on
No.
the.
Paul's amended motion to
Okay.
pay $20,000.
All right, so we'll vote on Paul's amended motion unless there's any more discussion. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay. Yeah, I said no. Yes, we're 1 minute over. Okay, so I will. Okay.
So I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay.
I'd like to amend the amount to $10,000.
Okay. Any discussion?
I just want a little clarity on why in terms of the numbers, because Brigid, you have $165.01 as the differential between the current salary and superintendent salary, which it makes sense to me. So can I just get a little clarity around why 10? What's that based on?
For me, it's because she wasn't doing just the superintendent's job. So she was working, I don't know how many hours, but much more than a 40-hour-a-week job. And so for me, that's why to me, it's more than just that differential. And
So she was the HR person, and she was getting paid for that.
she was the deputy superintendent and getting paid for that. And then she was also the superintendent for 39 days and not getting paid for that.
And the $165.01 is too low because?
Because that's a differential between what she's making in a job she was already doing and earning. And so basically you're saying for all that extra work, she should get $165 a day. And I think that sounds low because I think she was doing more than $165 a day worth. That would be, what, maybe 10, 20% more time. So in a day, that's 8 hours, 20% of that is, my math isn't going to be fast here, 1.6 hours. So that's saying she worked about 8 extra hours a week. And I think she worked much more than 8 extra hours a week.
Is there any more discussion? Quick, yep, go ahead.
The industries that I come from, when you're working holidays, weekends, or when you thought you were going to take vacation, it's time and a half, or you get compensated for that.
Actually, I just want to argue that because I worked, I never got, I think she should be compensated, but I don't want to go into industry because a lot of times people working their butts off in industry, and if they're salaried, they're not getting time and a half. I never did. I worked, over 80 hours, but she needs to be compensated, and we all agree. I do think that 108, 165 does just feel low. It just feels low. Yeah, sorry. I lost my train of thought, so we got it.
If I may, the 10K would be compensating her $256 a day.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, so go ahead.
This feels crazy. So we're saying $250 a day. Again, this isn't my money. I just feel like it's funny money right now. So we're just, you know what I mean? Like this is taxpayer money. So I want to be, I know, but I don't want it to feel like that. I want it people to understand, and that people to know that everybody on this committee understands it's taxpayer dollars, and our district needs to, wait a minute, let me just finish. Our district needs to compensate Marie because she worked her butt off and made sure that not one day slipped and not one initiative slipped, and and we're on track only because of the work that she did and that central office staff did, because they also, it wasn't just Marie, it was all the central office that took on a little bit of the superintendent's role. And I want to reiterate that because I want some acknowledgement for the whole central office staff, because each one of them didn't just do their job. They did a little piece of the superintendent's job. Marie was the deputy superintendent, or Marie was the interim superintendent, but everyone in that central office stepped up and took a role in this, and that's what that group does. And for some reason, yeah, 20,000 seemed really high. 10,000 just feels really high to me, but 6,000 feels really low to me. The 6,500 feels really low to me. I want her to be acknowledged. Part of me was at the 8,000 just because I couldn't, and I'm just going back and forth in this, I couldn't figure out, with all the calculations, what her daily rate ends up being, right? Because are we taking her daily rate? Are we doubling it? Do you know what I mean? I don't, tough one. So we're saying her daily rate's 576. Thank you for doing that calculation, and for me not paying attention to that. And then we're saying half of that goes in addition to the superintendent job, right? That's what we're clarifying, is that it would be. No. We're saying, no, I'm saying 575 is her daily rate, plus what we're saying is really 250 in addition to that. So we're taking, do you know what I mean? I'm just saying the 50%.
I just want to point out that the value to the district far outweighs that compensation.
I have to say, it feels terrible to try to point to the value of Marie. She is invaluable. The transition was seamless. We're all very grateful. I think we should take it here. I'll acknowledge that this is a token compensation. Stick with the $6,400 with a huge thank you, and we're sorry we didn't think of it sooner. But in hindsight, we just can't make this be a huge payout, because we want to be sensitive to all of the dynamics in the air right now, and it is absolutely no reflection on how valued she is and how hard Marie works. So that's my suggestion.
Hi, Steve Ballard from Boxborough. I think that we need to remember that a lot of people did extra work in these 2 months. Maybe Dawn did, maybe Deb did, certainly David and Karen, who were asked to be on a committee, didn't file Section 6 conflict of interest disclosure that says, I've been asked to be on a committee and not compensated. So they didn't do that, so maybe we can compensate them. I'm assuming that Marie, who was putting these people on the committee, recommending people to be on the interim committee, and then putting herself on it, was working a lot of time to try to be in that position right over there. But Dawn doesn't have anything in her contract that says she's going to step up and be on a committee and not get paid and go for several nights, late nights, to do executive sessions to screen resumes for her boss. Nor does David, nor does the president of the union. So we're going to give stipends. Why don't we give it to the people who really deserve it? Thank you.
Any more comments from the committee? We don't need to respond. Go ahead.
I do want to respond because I really, we have somebody who just resigned. It needs to stop. We're talking about compensating someone. We just heard our interim superintendent, our superintendent for this year say this is standard practice. Marie did an outstanding job, and the district needs to start understanding that we're making these votes because she did an outstanding job, and we need to start sticking up for what people are doing in this district. She did an outstanding job. We're just trying to figure out what makes sense. She needs to be compensated. She did a job and a half. It's just figuring out what it is. I'm sorry, unless I misunderstood what he said, it just bothers me. Yes, the central office did a spectacular job as well, and that's why, I don't want to go full throttle just because I know those people worked their butts off during the past 40 days, if not longer, trying to make sure that everything that we've been doing in the district doesn't miss a beat. So that's why I'm just trying to figure this out of what makes sense, and that's where I guess in my mind I came out at I felt that was too low, but I don't want to go so high that we're just getting, and I know we don't want to have to be ruled by what the town is, but it is our town, both towns, and it is the taxpayer money, and we need to understand of where we're compensating people. I think, I do feel the 8,000 is showing that she's unbelievably valued, and not going to so high that, we're still going to get pushback, but people need to understand she was doing 2 jobs, not 1 job, but 2 jobs. And that's the key thing here, is that she's doing 2 jobs.
So the proposal on the table, the motion on the table is for 10,000. If there's no more discussion, I think we should vote. If everyone's okay? Okay. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? 1, 2.
And just a point of order, this was on the amendment, and then we have to vote on the motion as amended. So it's another vote after this to clear up everything that's still on the table.
Good. Beth would be proud.
Thank you. 8 in favor and 7.5 against. So the amendment passed. So that means right now on the table, you've got a motion for a $10,000 stipend.
No, that's what we just voted on.
That was just the amendment.
That was the amendment.
That was the amendment. Okay, so
Yes.
now we have to vote for the, okay, excuse me. Yeah? Okay. All right, so if there's no more, is there more discussion before we vote again? No? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
So is that two?
So can you, maybe you need to raise your hand?
We just voted it
To
as an
amend.
amendment to the motion.
You amended the amount of the stipend. That's what the amended motion was. Now you have to vote on the original motion.
All right, so the motion passes. Thank you very much. It is 10:15, so I'm going to go ahead and skip, if you're okay with it, if we skip the subcommittee reports. So we're going to skip the subcommittee reports, and that just takes us to 16. Since our last meeting, or I'm not sure since our last meeting, but at least on the table right now, there are 3 open meeting law complaints received by the committee. From S. Ballard on 8/10/17 regarding the statement read at the 7/26/17 school committee meeting. From S. Ballard on 8/10/17 regarding the statement sent by the chair. From C. Cadillac on 8/14/17 regarding the statement sent by the chair on 7/20. Those have been acknowledged and will be responded to within the required time frame. The next thing, an FYI, I'm not going to go through the FYI, but I do want to remind everybody that there it is. Opening day is August the 30th, 8 a.m. in the high school auditorium. There is all the staff will be there. Bill's going to speak. Marie's going to speak. I think the union. I mean, it's really an opening day welcome. They start with coffee at 7:30, and then, it's a really nice time. It's a really great, and everyone, all of the committee, not the public, but all of the committee is invited to come to that. So, I don't have anything else. If there's, I will entertain a motion, unless you have something. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, second, someone said something. Okay, perfect.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions. Okay, thank you, good night.